Oh. Oh, that was Wednesdays, yeah. No, twice a month. Used to be.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the December 6th Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd first like to recognize we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today will be Ms. Nicolina Verkar. We don't have anyone attending electronically this morning. Today's Special Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. I'm not noting any members of the gallery here, but if they were, they'd be welcome to sign up for question period by the double doors to my left. In light of the fact I don't see any members of the gallery here, I'm not going to bother to read the usual warning about good behavior. That shouldn't be a problem this morning. The first item is the introduction of late items. Ms. Verkar, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one change to the agenda this morning. Agenda item 4A, 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Recap and Decision Points. Replace presentation titled 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan Recap and Decision Points. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. On to the presentations, the 2025-2029 Financial Plan Recap and Decision Points. Ms. Mercer, good morning.
Good morning. So today we're going to do a bit of a recap, just to reset where we're starting from. And Ms. Fuller will go through that, and then she will run through all of the decision slides. We have added a couple of slides that she will go through, so I'll hand it over to her and we'll start off the presentation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fuller, good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This morning I'm going to provide a brief recap on the current 2025 to 2029 draft financial plan, after which we'll be seeking your direction on changes you would like to incorporate for the provisional budget. We have made some changes to the budget since it was originally presented on November 27th, and I'm going to walk through the impact of those changes before we get to the decision slides. So after the changes, we still are at 8.7% for 2025, which does include our 1% for the asset management reserve. And keep in mind, this does not include all final benefit rates yet for employees. There has been no change to user fees, and of course the bylaw went for first 3 readings on Monday night and will be going for adoption on the 16th of December. The changes we made did, however, impact the typical household. It brought taxes down from $3,091 to $3,090, or a change of $247. So it made a $1 change to the typical house who will move the same as a Class 1. So what those changes were, they resulted in a $25,000 decrease, or 0.02%. They consisted of a $45,000 increase for taxes in lieu. So under the Local Government Act, BC Hydro, Fortis, Shaw, and TELUS pay us 1% of revenue from the preceding year for revenue earned within our area. So we receive letters from them that tell us how much they're going to pay us in property taxes, well, in lieu of property taxes for 2025, and now we've received all those letters, so those are now final numbers. And then this was slightly offset by a $20,000 increase in wages and benefits, and this is related to changes in levels or positions that have occurred since the draft budget was presented. Now, we've also made a few other changes that didn't impact property taxes, and all of these came from motions from Finance and Audit Committee meetings. In October, you agreed to add a project contingency for 2025, and this is being funded from the 2024 surplus. Then we updated MRDT projected revenue and did the allocation of revenue for the online accommodation platform to match the tactical plan that was just submitted to the ministry. And then, of course, you did approve a funding request from the Nanaimo Hornets Rugby Football Club, so that will be incorporated for provisional budget. Now, you should keep in mind, we do have other things that we still need to review and update prior to final budget. This will include growth, so we won't get those final growth numbers until the spring. We will again look at interest income. Interest rates have been changing and declining. We think we've taken that into account, but you can never tell what markets are going to do between now and the spring, so we will definitely look at interest income again in the spring before final budget. We'll look at building permit revenue, We'll look at casino revenue because it has been dropping off, so we'll see if that trend continues and if that will impact the budget. We have the contract for IAFF. Of course, it expires at the end of this year, and we do have money in committed contingency for a new contract. But of course, prior to final, we'll review the assumptions we've made and still see if they're the most current information that we have to make the assumptions on. We have our 911 contract for public safety answering point. We do have an estimate in the budget that does include an increase, but we haven't received the final contract amount yet. That should come in the next month or so. We have the recreation sharing agreement with the RDN. We don't find out that number until the spring, so that'll get incorporated for final. We have an estimate in right now. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we have employee benefits. Now, we added a slide and follow-up to the meeting on Wednesday as we wanted to provide a little more information about project funding for you. So the draft 2025 project plan is $63.9 million, and approximately $75,000 of that is funded from reserves. This table and chart provides a breakdown of the funding, but also shows you where the dollars actually flow from. So it's showing you where does the money come from that goes into some of those reserves that are funding the projects. So first, I want to touch on the General Asset Management Reserve. At $11.5 million, this is the largest single source of funding for 2025 projects. This reserve is, of course, funded from property taxation. In 2025, $14.1 million will be contributed to this reserve, and between projects and debt servicing for Fire Station 1, because as you know, we're funding the debt servicing for Fire Station number 1 from this reserve, we're budgeting to use $12.6 million from this reserve. Next, I want to touch on general revenue. So general revenue project funding is budgeted at $8.82 million, which represents a 5% increase over 2024 base funding, and this is in line with the 20-year investment plan we presented, and this represents about 14% of the 2025 project funding. Now, we also have a number of other reserves. Some of them are funded from user fees or a combination of user fees and revenue. So these include such things as the Facility Development Reserve, general parking, our sewer and water asset management reserves, as well as sewer and water operating reserves. And then finally, there's a few more I just want to touch on here. And these are the Climate Action Reserve Fund. So that's funded by an allocation of property taxes. So you contribute $165,000 a year from property taxes to this reserve. And this is also the reserve where we put our local climate action money that we get from the province. So we did get in 2024, we got 3 years worth of funding, just over $950,000, and that covers up till the end of their fiscal year 2026, 2027. We have the Equipment Depreciation Reserve. So this is funded by property taxes and internal charges. So for the fire fleet, there is a charge that is funded by property taxes that we put into that reserve for future fire fleet replacement. And then we have internal charges. And internal charges also come in the photocopier reserve and the IT reserve. So I just want to talk a little bit about internal charges so you understand where the funding comes from for internal charges. So internal charges relate to the use of city equipment, be it the photocopier, if you're using a photocopier that's owned by the city, the network charge, so every desktop and laptop in the city pays a network charge, and that helps support our IT infrastructure. And then, of course, we have fleet vehicles, which we've talked about before. They have a fleet charge. So depending what department uses that vehicle, that depends how that internal charge is funded. So if I'm working for the sewer department and driving a vehicle, my fleet charge is being funded by sewer user fees. If I work for the water department and I'm using a computer, water user fees are funding my desktop. If I'm in the finance department and using my desktop, it's probably funded from property taxes because that's the most common source of funding for that department. If it's in parking, parking fees are covering off those vehicles and those computers. If it's the sanitation truck, user fees are covering that off. So internal charges are funded from a variety of sources. It could be revenue that that department's generating, could be user fees, or it could be property taxes. So hopefully this just provides a bit of an overview for you of how projects are funded, but not just how those reserves are funded that are going into the project, so you have a better understanding of where all the money's flowing through.
Councillor Gesselborg has a question.
Thanks, Mayor, through you. Excuse me. When, for projects that are funded out of this, now some projects, will they be portions that will come from, say, the general fund asset management reserve and say a government grant or a user fee. Like it's not being drawn out of, like, one project doesn't equate to one specific reserve.
Through the
At
chair
times it'll be
to,
multiple.
through the chair to Council Gesselbrecht, some projects are funded from one funding source, and a lot of projects, especially larger projects, are funded from multiple funding sources. For example, the ERP replacement project is being funded in part from the IT reserve and in part from asset management, because it's part of our IT infrastructure, but it's also renewal of existing asset. A lot of complete street projects, they might have new components to them that are funded from general revenue. They might be paving a street, so they have some asset management money. They could even include a portion of a DCC project, so they have DCC funding. So it really depends on the project. It depends on the type of asset we're creating. Projects can have multiple components, that is a new piece, a renewal piece, an upgrade piece, and they have all different funding sources. So really small projects are probably funded from one funding source, but larger projects, a lot of times they have multiple funding sources.
Okay, and just a follow-up on that. Out of the projects that are going to be funded in 2025, what percent of the $8 million currently requisitioned would be funding those projects directly in 2025, or is everything time delayed? Like, does the funding for those most projects always come out of the general fund asset management reserve, planning wise, and that $8 million basically just goes and replenishes that reserve? Does that make sense?
To the chair, to Council Gesselbrecht, I'm not quite sure I followed the question. With the general revenue funding, there's a number of projects that every year get funded from that because they don't have another funding source. For example, condition assessment programs, some of the smaller furniture and equipment, those sorts of things are funded from general revenue. And then general revenue a lot of times is used to fund new components of projects, because a lot of our reserves, unless it's an upgrade that's on our DCC bylaw, we don't have a lot of reserves that support new infrastructure. So general revenue funding really helps support new infrastructure, which you will see when we get to the decision point slides, and we have 3 slides there for opportunities for reducing funding for projects, and most of that funding ties to new projects,
Right.
and that's why we're using the general money, because that's really our only funding option for those projects.
Okay, great, thanks so much.
So we do have a number of decision points for council's consideration, and staff is here today to answer any questions as they come up. As I mentioned on Wednesday, we have reordered the slides, so we're going to start with ones that decrease the budget first, and then move on to ones that would result in a property tax increase if you wanted to move forward. So first, we have the RCMP contract. The 2025 to 2029 draft financial plan budgets the RCMP contract at 95% for all years due to the history of vacancies and to minimize annual operating surplus. The 2024 RCMP contract was budgeted at 92%. We do have 3 options for your consideration. One is to reduce the contract to 92%, which would do a reduction of 0.8 in 2025 and an increase of 0.73 in 2026, and this is the staff recommendation. We have option number 2, which would take it to 93%, which would be a reduction of 0.53 and an increase of 0.48 in 2026, or the final option would be to maintain the contract at the 95%.
Councillor Armstrong.
Are we making motions now? Yes. Then I'd like to move motion 1.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. Discussion on this?
I'll just say that I've never seen their contract come in ever at 100%, so I think 92% seems pretty fair, and I'm seeing the superintendent nod, so, and it has brings us down quite a bit on taxes, so I think that's a good option.
I would say, unfortunately, your comments are dead on based on experience. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.
Next, we have a negative wage contingency. The 2025 to 2029 draft financial plan budgets for a full complement of staff, including property tax funded positions. In recent years, the city has had a higher rate of staff vacancies, so to minimize annual operating surplus, we could budget for a negative wage contingency. We do have two options for your consideration. One is a $750,000 negative contingency. This would be a 0.5 reduction in 2025 and a 0.46 increase in 2026. Or option number two is a $500,000 negative contingency, which would be a 0.33 reduction in 2025 and a 0.31 increase in 2026. And option three would be to have no negative wage contingency, and staff's recommendation is to go with the $750,000 negative contingency.
Moved,
Yes.
Councillor Manley, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Discussion on this? Councillor Perino?
Well, actually, I was just going to move option number one, so it's on the floor. It's good. I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Any further discussion? This is the easy part. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.
And finally, we have a third option for reducing property taxes. So base project funding from property taxes is currently budgeted at $8.82 million. Three of the projects in the 2025 plan have an allocation of property tax funding that exceeds $250,000. Base funding for 2025 could be reduced by up to $1.4 million by delaying one or more of these projects. The three projects identified at over $250,000 are the Commercial Street Implementation Phase 2, the Neck Point Parking Lot Project, and 3rd and Fitzwilliam Upgrade. However, staff does not recommend reducing the funding for the 3rd and Fitzwilliam area upgrade, and there's two reasons for this. One is the general funding only represents 5.1% of the total $6.4 million budget, and that general revenue funding goes towards a retaining wall and 4 traffic cameras. The bulk of it is the retaining wall, and without the retaining wall, you cannot, it's needed to do the road widening, which is going to increase your conductivity and your safety, so you are really sort of delaying a large project for a very small savings in property taxes. As well, the city did submit recently an active transportation infrastructure grant that is related to the retaining wall and drainage work. So should you choose to remove the general funding, we would need to withdraw our grant application because we would no longer be constructing the infrastructure for which we applied for a grant. Now, if you delay these projects, they would be moved outside the 2025 to 2029 financial plan, and then staff would need to revisit the timing of these projects when we do the 2026 to 2035 project plan. So we did only create 2 slides, one for the Commercial Street and one for Neck Point Park. So for Commercial Street, we have the Diana Call Plaza improvements, so the front half is budgeted in 25 and 2026. The total budget is $2.3 million, and it includes general revenue funding of just over $795,000 in 2025 and just over $875,000 in 2026. You could delay this project outside of the 5-year financial plan, and base project funding would be reduced by $795,000 in 2025. The 2026 funding we would not reduce, we would reallocate it to other projects that are already in the 2026 budget. So the estimated property tax impact is 0.53 reduction in 2025 and an increase of 0.49 in 2026. So just to be clear, this would be a one-time reduction in project funding. We would not be touching the 2026 project funding. So that's why you're seeing that increase in 2026 is now there's a bigger gap to make up in property taxes for projects. And we have provided a motion should council wish to consider this option.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong?
2 questions, if I may, through to Mr. Sims. Yeah. The first one is, if we were to delay Commercial Street implementation, do we lose any government funding or infrastructure funding? No. And my second one, obviously our timeline is off now because of and we don't know when that's going to go back on. Would this, if we delayed it by a year, would that have a big impact? Or would, I'm just thinking, would it, if we delayed it, it might have a better impact for businesses, sorry.
Oh, Your Worship, to Councillor Armstrong, I think one of the things that's in the works is that in early in the new year, the staff had intended to come forward to council to say, there is an opportunity to delay this. And it's also workshopping what we want to do. Do we want to do this phase 2 at Diana Krall, or do we want to now move to the other end of the block? And maybe that will help mitigate some of the impacts on businesses. One of the things that's tied to the work on Diana Krall is the membrane over the parkade. So that's at a point now where we need to start addressing that. It's leaking, and we don't want to let that one go on too long. So that's the, my personal nervousness in pushing this out beyond the 5-year plan, unless there's an awareness that we'd need to bring it back in.
Thank you. Then, based on that, I would like to move the motion that the
Councillor Armstrong, I'm going to ask that, I've got quite the list.
Oh,
If
okay.
we just
Sorry.
hold off on the motions till we've had a bit of discussion on this, please, if that's all right. Councillor Manley, then Thorpe, and Gesselbrock.
Thank you. Through you. So this phase 2 portion, is this going to have a disruption on Commercial Street at all?
Your Worship, it would if we proceed in the manner that it's currently envisioned.
Would that require like digging up more of Commercial Street and changing water lines?
There would certainly be closures on Commercial Wharf and potentially a little bit up Skinner. But I will note that, again, the intent is, we're sort of questioning, and we would want to sort of have that discussion and questioning session with council about, do we proceed with this? At the same time, in 2025, we'd like to continue on with the design work of, either this project or something towards the other end, towards Wallace Street.
And there's potential to get some kind of grant funding to maybe cover this in future years?
Your Worship, I can't imagine that there'd be any grant funding for this unless the feds come out with downtown revitalization type funding, which we haven't seen for a while.
And just one final question: how long of a disruption would this be for Commercial Street and the merchants on Commercial Street for this part of the project?
Your Worship, without knowing the entire scope of the project, it's hard to predict, but it'd be several months for sure.
Okay.
I think staff's of the opinion with the disruption that we've experienced here, which will continue on until May. We don't want to go, hey, we're finished, and then, come back in not very many months to start it all over again. I think we're certainly sensitive, but that'll form part of that discussion in the new year.
Yeah, that would be one of my main concerns too. I think that the downtown businesses are pretty weary of the construction in the downtown core, and if we can put something off for a little while and lower the tax burden. I do have a concern about what you're saying about the roof of the parkade though, so I'm wondering if there's other solutions to that without doing the full project. Is that a possibility, or something we'll discuss in the new year? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thanks, Your Worship. I was actually just going to make the motion that Councillor Armstrong has already suggested. I don't see this as a top priority, so I will support that motion when it comes to the floor.
And Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. I just have a couple questions. So the motion is to push it outside of the 2025 to 2029 financial plan. That doesn't mean it's being pushed out past 2029. It's just being pushed out from starting say if we wanted to start at 2027, would we get the same tax reduction as, I guess, how far of a delay are we pushing it out?
Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrock, so for the 2025 to 2029 financial plan, the recommendation is that it would move outside. So that means it would need to sit in 2030 or later. However, when staff starts in February to update the project plan, should council say we want you to move it forward, then staff would look at reprioritizing projects and how we can move it back into the plan into council's desired year.
Okay, great. Yeah, just commentary on this. I think delaying it is a good idea on multiple fronts. One, just tax-wise, but I think that there is fatigue, and by the time this gets done, if we do another construction, it'll be 2025, and people will not be happy with us. And I do think that giving the downtown folks a break is a good idea. Despite, I do think that this is a great project, and it's going to really make a difference. And I think just how we space that out and do it in a way to limit disruption is the best. So I would be supportive of this motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Sims, and this is on the three we're considering, so to speak. No significant increase in maintenance costs if we push out the Diana Krall Plaza work. But my understanding is Neck Point, we're having to spend a fair bit of time maintaining all the potholes visited by thousands and thousands of the Nime Whites. I'm also concerned about the question of accessibility. I wonder if you could, good morning, Ms. Davis.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Yes, it is a much requested project at Neckpoint Park.
Welcome to kindergarten.
It is a much requested project, and it is something we hear about from residents fairly frequently. We are spending quite a bit of time at Neckpoint Park doing maintenance. Probably a monthly, we're in there with our equipment doing a minor, and then twice a year we get someone to come in and do a major grading.
Thank you. If there's no further questions of staff, back to you, Councillor Armstrong. If you're to make the motion respecting Diana Krall.
Yeah, I would like to move the motion.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Armstrong, you want to say anything further? No? Councillor Eastmere?
I guess I understand the points about the fatigue of the businesses downtown. I think I hear a lot of criticism that we start projects and don't finish them. So I guess I'm frustrated to see us start Commercial Street and not follow through on it and potentially push it out to the next council's term. And I know there's a lot of community interest in revitalizing Diana Krall Plaza. And I know that staff have put a ton of work into community consultations, and so that I find that a bit frustrating when we've put a lot of time and effort into consulting with people and coming up with plans, and then pushing it off for the sake of 0.5% in the property tax increase. So I hope that if we push this off, we will still be able to have a discussion about ways that we might be able to temporarily or revitalize Diana Krall, whether that's like pop-up, whatever, like just ways that we can kind of breathe some life into that space that doesn't necessarily take many months-long construction project. But yeah, I hope that we are committed to following through with this project at some point, because to only do the section that we're doing now and leave the rest of it, I really want to see this project fully completed, and I think the downtown deserves it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. I share Councillor Eastmere's reservations about this decision, and I'd just like Mr. Sims to comment. Did I hear you say that this would allow us to reconnect with the folks that we've consulted with, that there would be a deeper awareness of what that space needs? Can you just expand on that a little bit, please?
Your Worship, I think that's independent of whether this motion goes through or not. So this motion would see the project slip outside of the 5-year plan, and then, as Ms. Fuller indicated, be brought back for consideration perhaps in next year's or the next round of financial planning. But the intent staff had with this in the budget would be to have the discussion with council and with the community about timing and also the scope of the work. So we sort of certainly recognize the fatigue. Council hears about it quite a bit, and pushing, one of the options might be to say, let's go down the block to Wallace Street as an example. So that it's just to have that discussion and rejig the timing. However, the funding in the plan will allow us to continue on with the detailed design, community engagement, and so on. So moving this out sort of would put a pause on the work until it's back in that 5-year plan.
Thank you, that helps. I am concerned about pushing it out 5 years from now, particularly as Councillor Eastmere pointed out. We had huge consultation and there was so much excitement, and this council determined that downtown was a priority for us. But I do absolutely recognize the fatigue of the businesses and the construction down there, so I am going to support. Thank you.
Thank you. In order, Councillor Sprino, Eastmere, Thorpe, and Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say, I think that when you begin discussions with businesses and you start to look at what you have to do, you know, you think, oh, wow, you think of the goal at the end and how good it's going to look. But I have to tell you, I've spent quite a bit of time down there, and it's shocking to me how devastating it is for just the movement of pedestrian traffic. And I think this is a very good move to stall this for a while. It just gives them a break, gets the business back up and going, and because it's tough. It's really tough down there, so I'm glad to see we're doing this.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere?
I just had a question about some of the items that we were going to be adding downtown that came from the filming, because I feel like there were some like funding commitments, and I feel, were those sort of tied with that Commercial Street project, and will we be able to like do string lighting across the street and things like that without proceeding with this phase of the Commercial Street redevelopment?
That's a good question. Thanks, Your Worship. To Councillor Eastmere, the string lighting is part of the project itself across the street. However, there was a contribution from the producer to do string lighting across the plaza, and we're still having discussions with the Coastal Community Credit Union about attaching the lighting to their building. But there is a design for that, and we still have that financial contribution, as well as the repainting of the mural on Skinner Street.
Okay, I'll hope that we can proceed with those regardless. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
Thanks, Your Worship. I support this project overall, but unlike possibly others on council, I have not heard any great outcry from the general public that they see this as a top priority. And what I have heard, and we heard it at our town hall the other night, was a request to consider what projects could council possibly defer or delay to take some burden off taxpayers immediately. And I think this is a good example of one of those projects. And I think it also, as has been pointed out, will defer pain to the downtown merchants. So I'm happy to support it for future, but I think it's a good project for deferral at this point. So I will support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Manley?
Thank you. Yeah, the earlier question I had through you about possible funding, I think, isn't part of commercial funded through Community Works or Growing Communities, the current project?
Through the chair to Councillor Manley, part of the current work being undertaken is funded through I think it's Growing Communities, yes.
So there would be potential for future funding through those kind of programs to work on commercial again, maybe? I share the same hesitation that other councillors do, but I like to see this project through and finished, and so, but I think bumping it into the 2030 plan is prudent at this time, and look at giving the downtown businesses a bit of a reprieve on construction, and picking it up again soon, and giving the taxpayers a bit of a break, because as Councillor Thorpe said, people were asking us about what we could let go this time around, and I think that I'm going to support it for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, and I just want to thank staff for bringing this one forward. I realize it's a challenge, and these projects have been on the books, and as Councillor Hemmons and Easter pointed out, a lot of discussion, public consultation around it, but it does seem sensible in the circumstances, and I'm actually optimistic that as we see some of the works finished, that it will provide an enticement for people to come downtown, and it'll make the next project less onerous on the local businesses. So if I'm not seeing any further questions or discussion, all those in favor of the motion and those opposed, Councillor Eastmere, motion carries. The next one for consideration is Neck Point parking. Fairly clear, and if someone wants to make the motion, I will be voting against it. I think this one is something that impacts on thousands and thousands of our citizens and tourists year in, year out. People with accessibility issues face trying to trundle across a pretty scary parking lot from time to time, and so for what it's going to save, I don't think it's it's worth it in terms of this year's budget. I'd rather see the money spent and the project finished and relieve some of the pressure on our park staff that they hear in year out from people saying, when are you going to fix the damn thing?
Yes, or 6.9.
Councillor Eastmere, Armstrong, and Perino in order.
Year two, because
Thank you. I agree with you. I don't think that we should be putting off this project. As you said, it's definitely an accessibility issue, and we have so many people that use that park, so it's time to get that done.
Councillor Armstrong
Just echo the last two speakers.
and Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. The difference is, of course, with the one that we just passed for Commercial Street, that the impact to property tax was substantial. This is very minor, but it sure does a great deal of work. The positive things for Neck Point, and hundreds of people use this on a very regular basis, so I think this is important.
Not seeing any further speakers, I think we can move on, Ms. Fuller. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Ms. Davis.
So before we move on, I did just want to provide an update to the committee.
Mr. Lindsay?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate Council's discussion and deliberation on this morning. And I just, and for the context of those watching, I wanted people to understand, and I think Ms. Fuller, with that chart she provided this morning, gave a really good explanation to the community about how different projects are funded. So if there's a question about why did Council this morning spend time deliberating these projects and not the many, many other projects that we have in our capital plan, is the answer is you can take out those projects because where they're funded from, it has no impact on your taxation next year. So the reason that we focused on these three is because they come from your capital fund that are from taxation for next year. And when staff looked at it, we pulled out those projects over 250 grand that would have an impact on taxation. So that's why those projects were on your list today and not the many, many other ones. The truth is, if you look at those other projects and you decide to move one of those on, they'll make no difference to property taxes next year. And they have the added complication of they're tied in and funded from so many different sources and tied in with other projects. It has this kind of this cascading effect of really complicating all the work that we're trying to do. But we thought these three were at least worthy of putting in front of Council this morning. So appreciate the discussion on it.
Well said, Mr. Lindsay. Thank you very much. Ms. Fuller, please.
Yeah, so I would like to just recap. So we started the meeting for 2025 at 8.7 and 2026 at 4.4, because I do think it's important to keep track of where we are at year two, because we will be sitting here 1 year from now looking at that year two number. After those reductions, we are now sitting at 6.9 in 2025 and 6.2 in 2026. So one option that council could consider is we could delay looking at additions till the spring. In the spring, we will have new updated numbers for investment income, building permit revenue. We will know final growth numbers, and then you will have an idea. If growth comes in higher than what we are currently projecting, you would have some money that you could then decide, do you want to use that money to reduce property taxes, or do you now want to look at those additions and prioritize those additions? So I just want to put that out as an option. Is there's no reason you have to make a decision on additions today. We could look at them in the spring. It would delay the start date of some of the new positions till the fall, but it is an option if council does want to see how some of those estimates come in, so you have a better understanding of where you're going to be sitting for final.
I'm going to suggest, and it's open for discussion obviously, that we actually go through what is in front of us without making decisions today, as suggested by Ms. Fuller, but I think it's important that the public hear what we're considering, that we as a council can consider what may or may not be done. And then as, well, was it Sir John A. Macdonald, old tomorrow? Why do today what you can put off till tomorrow? I think that's probably wise, so we can come up with something that's accurate and a solid factual basis on which to make these decisions. So, Councillor Armstrong.
I do want to go through the business cases, but I do think we should be making decisions today. I don't want to wait. I think these are important. That's why they're here. If things changes for the better, then great. That means our taxes go down and we're not locked in anyhow. But I think these are really important, especially when you start looking, if we do want to add additional RCMP members, we need to get our names in now, not 6 or 7 months down later, because it's going to be delayed even further. And just to speak to the RCMP, I'm concerned in their next negotiations that they're going to be looking for resource parity. And when I looked at it, we are 60 members less than Victoria, who's got less population and less crime. So I think we need to start looking at that now, not later. And it's the same thing with the CSOs. Like, I think all of these are very important positions, and my position is not going to change no matter what comes in later. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbach.
Thanks. I can understand, there is going to be some more information regarding where we're sitting coming down the line, but I tend to agree with Councillor Armstrong in the sense that I'm ready to make decisions on some of these points, and then as more information comes later on, we can either add or subtract things if we need to, but I think having just a fulsome debate on them now might as well get it done. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. I just, as if we're going to work through each item, then I would suggest that council, your options are obviously approve them now, deny them, or defer them now if we're going to defer them to the spring. So I think it would just be good to get some clarity if council actually wants an item deferred, or you don't want to proceed with it and tell us just to not bring it back to you. So any of those three options would be great.
And let me just say as a general comment, if we approve these items in the expenditure, the number that we've just knocked down goes back up this morning. And then if we turn around and knock it back down, I suppose we might be seen as heroes, but some people won't remember anything other than the big number to start as opposed to the better number later. I'm not sure whether I want to have two hits where one will do, but let's go through the process. Ms. Fulla?
So we will start with business cases. 4 business cases have been prepared for council's consideration. The first one we have is Community Safety Action Plan Strategy, and this has been broken into 2 pieces. We have one that looks at additional community safety officers and one that looks at public space cleanliness. So for the community safety officers, we have 2 options. Option 1 is an expansion of the program that includes 10 new CSOs and the conversion of a part-time bylaw steno position to permanent full-time. Implementation would be phased over 2 years, which would reduce the budget impact in 2025, but it also will help with the gradual onboarding of staff. There is 2 funding options for option number 1. One has the general capital reserve used to fund the fleet units and the EV charger. This would have a property tax impact of 0.33 in 2025, 0.36 in 2026, and 0.06 in 2027. And I do have a related motion for that one. And then option 2, if you wanted to add to the program, would be to fund both operations and the capital purchase from general revenue. And this would have an estimated property tax increase of 0.41 in 2025, 0.34 in 2026, or 0.02 in 2027. And of course, the other option would be to maintain the status quo.
Councillor Armstrong?
Through you to either Mr. Hornby or Mr. LeBerge. If we approve these, will they actually be deployed to the rest of the city? Because I get that question a lot, especially from the north end. And what I hear from the north end a lot is they feel very ignored by this council, that our efforts are all down here and that they've got the same similar crimes up there and not getting the same response.
Yeah, through your worship, thanks for the question. The proposed increase in resources was actually just to adequately staff the downtown resources, but the reality is that the CSOs currently service outside the downtown core, particularly the Bowen Park area, but they go throughout the city, not to the extent of what they do downtown. So to be clear, this would be a downtown resource, but we remain flexible to support the entire city.
Follow up, if I may. Also, with the numbers that you have, would this help you go towards better mental health recovery for some of your CSOs, because they're dealing with the very marginalized and vulnerable population, which we all know has a huge impact on mental health?
Yeah, through your worship, thanks for the question. The current staffing model allows us to have 3 officers on shift at any time, and one of the rotations is only 2. So what we realized when we had Deloitte look at this project is that we're minimally staffed, and that left our officers working alone a lot of the time. So as we've had injuries and people away, we keep having to scale back the hours and the days that we can work simply because officers were working alone. More to your point, one of the key things we wanted Deloitte to look at is the burnout of the department. They are over-resourced. We have teams of 2 and 3 officers attending to scenarios where there are 25 to 40 to 50 people on the street that they're dealing with. It's just not safe and it's not adequate. And I can tell council that in a recent conversation with my contemporaries in Penticton that also have a CSO program, they're actually looking at collapsing their program and redeveloping it because they have so much of their staff away on traumatic stress injuries. It's a smaller team and a smaller problem, but you know, they're struggling for the very things that Councillor Armstrong's talking about. They're not properly resourced, and we, you know, I feel quite strongly that if we're going to continue with the CSO program and keep our officers safe, that we have to give them more capacity.
Thank you.
Councillor Perino, Manley, and Gesselbrock in that order.
Thank you, Your Worship, and a question through to you, Mr. LaBerge. So add 9 new full-time community safety officers. I want to say, first of all, that the work that they do is so important to this city, and I agree with Councillor Armstrong. Certainly, we definitely, I see it in the north too, where, you know, we'd love to have more representation up there. But the question that I have is, could we not do 3, 3, and 3, you know, over 3 years versus, would that make a difference? I just wondered why the 9 number was there.
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, thanks for the question. Now, what we asked Deloitte to do is look at what the necessary staffing was to do the job effectively. When we're asking for 10 officers, understand that that's spread over up to 21 and a half hours a day, 7 days a week. Yeah. So 10 sounds like a lot, but when you spread it over that amount of time, it's going to add 1 and in some cases 2 additional officers that are working at the same time, and more importantly, that it's going to give us a second supervisor as well, because Mr. Hornby is trying to cover basically what's almost a 24/7 operation himself. So even with these added resources, it's still a thinly provided service.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And so this would be over 2 years. The 9 would be over the 2 years. Is that right?
Our proposal would be to have 6 in the first year and 4 in the second. That would give us a chance to onboard, train, select good candidates, and that would be a measured pace that we could manage.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, and through you, I'm curious about the fleet units. How many fleet units is that are being added, and how many chargers?
Yes, thank you. So we currently have 12 officers and they have 1 vehicle. Now, of course, what our plan intends is that they do a lot of foot and e-bike patrols, and that's been very effective. But the reality is, to Councillor Armstrong's question, these officers are regularly going to Bowen Park, they're going to other parts of the city, and the reality is right now is that we're borrowing fleet vehicles that are used by all city staff. We're using vehicles that are utilized by, you know, for parking and other bylaws. It's not enough. If we're going to have 20 officers, we need 3 vehicles. I can tell council, however, that we have applied for a federal grant. We should know in the fairly near future for potential funding for 3 vehicles that would be funded through that stream. If that were to come through, then we could revisit our vehicle needs.
Okay, thank you. And just another question, if I may. This is a great program. I think that the community safety officers are doing really good work, and the community appreciates it. And I know that the touch that they have with the people that are struggling with homelessness, mental health, and addiction is you know, it's valuable, that the work they're doing is good and it's compassionate. I'm wondering, we have 227 beds coming online soon, and I'm wondering how that will impact the need for community safety officers in the community.
Through your worship, you know, that's a very good question, and I would like to be cautiously optimistic that it's going to improve the context on the street. The reality is, we've said many times, is that we estimate that the unsheltered population in the city is probably, around 1,000. If we could get more souls into supportive environments, it would certainly improve it, but it still leaves a very large context out in the street. And as we've seen over time, it's ever rising. I just want to restate what I said earlier. I don't think the workload of these CISOs is going to reduce anytime in the foreseeable future. What we're trying to do is get a staffing level to manage the status quo as it is right now.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. I think it is optimistic to think that that many beds is going to solve the problem. I think, the NAV Center and some of these ones that are focused on people that are most street entrenched, and trying to get other folks that don't need those kind of services into rental supplements and those kind of things, just to get people out of their cars and out of the shelters, et cetera, is going to be helpful. But the street entrenched population is what really the CSOs are dealing with, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock, Thorpe and Eastmere.
Thank you. I'm just ready to. My questions were answered. I could move the motion if we're there yet, or.
Let's just get through the questions, and then we'll. Thank you, Councillor Thorpe.
I'm not sure whether we want to have further discussion or we want to focus our discussion, and that's what my intent was, Your Worship. I think over the past year we have heard consistently the value of the community safety officers, and we have heard consistently that the number one concern of our citizens is safety, especially in the downtown area, although not restricted to there. So I would certainly be prepared to put a motion on the table, but if Councillor Gesselbrock wishes to, or if there's other discussion first, then fine.
Let's let Councillor Eastmere ask your question first, please.
Thank you. Through you, I just have a question about the office space for the additional officers, because I feel at some point there was a discussion that the current, space wasn't sufficient to even add more officers. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, through Your Worship, yes, that's a very good question, and that was one of the things that staff considered when we looked at the three options. And we felt that if we exceeded more than the 10 officers, it would probably require that we move from SARC and find another space for the department. So that would be a significant escalation on costs, and I think we've effectively avoided that, at least for the time being, by looking at the numbers that we're asking for. Additionally, what we're doing is, as we equip the new vehicles, we're going to put portable workstations in them with the hope and expectation that the officers can do all their work in the field rather than needing office space. So I've had considerable conversations with Mr. Hornby, and he feels that the existing space in SARC with these additions should suit the needs with the 10 additional officers.
And a question through to our financial staff about how much money actually is 0.33%, or the two options. I have a hard time conceptualizing of how much money that actually is.
Through the chair to Councillor Eastmere. So option number 1 is if it's funded from property taxes, so assuming you choose to fund the vehicles from the general capital reserve and the EV charger, you're looking at a property tax impact of approximately $489,000 in year 1 and 1.08 million in year 2 and about 1.2 million in year 3 and then 1.2 and change after that. If you choose to fund the vehicle and the equipment charger from property taxes, then you're looking at approximately $608,000 in year 1, 1.16 million in year 2, and then the 1.2 million approximately in future years.
Okay, I wish we had seen a business case for 5 officers. I feel like nine's a lot. So I wish we had some more options here. That would be my preference, but that doesn't speak to the great work that our CSOs do, and see them out there interacting with folks and doing a really good job of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, the request for 9, was that a result of the Deloitte report? Is that a direct ask of that report, or have you guys kind of taken the Deloitte report and assessed it against your own needs and come up with this?
Through your worship, so we asked Deloitte to do 3 things. First of all, what kind of staffing would we need for kind of the status quo to keep the service delivery to the downtown core, to have the resources to make sure that we cover for long-term leave, illnesses, training, et cetera. And that was the number that they came back. It was the 10 officers, 9 officers, and a supervisor. Then we asked for additional input on how many additional officers would we need to expand it to 24 hours a day, and then thirdly, to expand it citywide, and those were the second and third options. And, you know, we realized as we're looking at the numbers that options 2 and 3 were going to be tremendously, cumbersome to administer and very costly, and that's why we focus solely on the number 1 recommendation. So, you know, those weren't numbers we proposed to Deloitte. Those were numbers they provided us, saying those are the minimums you need to sustain and keep your CSOs healthy and be able to provide the service in the number of hours and days that you do currently.
Thank you. I'll just say that I came in this morning prepared to go to bat for 3 items, and this was not one of them, but I've been convinced. So I'll make the recommended motion, Your Worship. I see no one else on the speakers list.
And the recommend as in?
Number 1.
Number 1? Seconded. 1A.
There's 1A and 1B, so if you could clarify if you're wanting to fund the vehicles in the equipment charger from the general capital or from property taxes.
General capital, please.
Thank you.
I believe that's the first.
Okay,
Yeah,
that'll be that motion. Thank you.
1A, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Hemmons, do you wish to say anything further to it? No. Councillor Gesselbrock, and then Councillor Perino.
Thanks, Mayor, through you. You know, I think we're, you know, in the midst of a crisis, and this was one of our responses, and I think it's been incredibly effective and well received, and not from the wider community, but also from all the service agencies. The Community Safety Officer program has really helped us deliver many programs in terms of more safely and effectively supportive housing, shelters, and I think for our ability to move forward, it's critical that we make this program sustainable. I mean, I think, you know, in our initial funding and deployment, you know, I think the community safety officers that we had really stepped up to the plate and went over and above to make the program work, and I think that it's very clear, and I do think that there's a serious risk of it not being sustainable if we don't fund this. And so I just want to say thank you for the work that's been done, and I think that you know, with this additional staffing, I think we're going to be setting up ourselves up for success as this new housing does come online, the supportive housing and potentially a day use hub, to make sure that, one, we are continuing with a compassionate approach in supporting people getting into services, and also maintaining a level of safety and security in the community that, you know, is a basic expectation for Nanaimo. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. And a question through you to Mr. LaBerge. The second part of this motion is fund the 2 CSO fleet units. When will you know about the grant that you spoke about?
Through the chair, maybe I could defer to Ms. Full. I don't know, but it's closed, and I think we're waiting for a decision. I'm guessing 2 or 3 months, but I don't know if finance has anything additional.
Through the chair to Council Perino, I can't remember the exact date, but 2 or 3 months sounds about accurate. It was a fairly quick turnaround time, and 2 or 3 months is fairly quick with grant applications.
So hopefully we have a good chance for this. Would this help to reduce the percentage a bit?
Through the chair to Councillor Perino, know this, if we get the grant, the impact would be that it would leave money in your general capital reserve, because then the vehicle purchases would be funded from there. But it would also have a property tax impact, because the grant is actually for 3 vehicles, if I'm correct, which means we would have to add a fleet charge for the 3rd vehicle, which is not currently included in the business case.
Man, you can't win, eh?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'll be supporting this motion exactly as Councillor Gesselbrook said. This is important to our community, and hopefully all these and other initiatives will help to make a difference. So thank you.
Councillor Eastmere.
I will be supporting this because I recognize the importance of making our CSO program sustainable. I find this frustrating because we are dealing with symptoms that are a result of the failure of the provincial government to do their job in helping us address the housing and shelter crisis, the opioid crisis, and the mental health crisis. And so we are stepping in to do this work, and like our community is flailing. And we're not alone in this. This is like BC-wide, Canada-wide, but I find it really frustrating the amount of money that we have to spend on the front line dealing with people who need help and they need a place to go. And I wish we could be putting this money into drop-in spaces, and not even drop-in spaces. I wish we could be putting it into housing, sustainable long-term housing with the supports that people need. But as we see, we can't even do that because we don't have the supports that people need at the supportive housing that exists. So I just find it ridiculous that we're constantly having to fill gaps that the province should be addressing. So this is a lot of money for us to be spending, and our CSOs are doing amazing work. But at the end of the day, if people had a safe place to live, if they had drugs that weren't killing them, and if they had the mental health supports and basic health care that they needed, we wouldn't be having these issues. So I'm supporting this, but I'm not happy about it, and I know that we will continue our advocacy to the province because we've been working hard on that, and they need to step up and help us so that we don't have to be spending money on CSOs, and that people have a proper place to live and the supports that they need.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thanks, Mayor, and I just wanted to speak to Councillor Eastmer's concern. You know, I definitely can identify with the frustration, and sometimes it may appear that this, is like sort of downstream solution and to supporting the community. But I do want to say that more I've seen the community safety officer program interact in the community and how it's integrated in with our service provision and building out the housing, I think that the program is actually a really big part of the solution of working out of this mess, and I think bringing the case to the province to continually improve how it shows up and resources it. One example is we just recently did a point-in-time count in Nanaimo, and it was very last minute, the funding, and probably a large amount of the work in terms of getting the numbers, contacting and engaging members of the homelessness, the folks living within homelessness, was done by the CSO program. And that's collecting very valuable data on where we're at as a community. And when we roll out programs like a day use hub, when we put in the supportive housing navigation center, it'll be our CSOs that are going to be one of the primary frontline workers that are going to be helping individuals get into these type of services and stay, and also working around them to ensure that everybody in concerns around safety and order are being maintained. And so I think this is going to help us get us out of the problem and not simply be a Band-Aid because it's continually to fester. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will resist echoing what Councillors Easter and Gesselbrock have both said, because they are accurate on both ends of the scale, if I may say it this way, that the work that the CSOs do is very helpful for the most vulnerable in the streets. There's no question about it, and it's important work and it's valuable work, but it's work that should be undertaken as Councillor Eastmere has pointed out, by the provincial government. I think the recent news stories come out of Vancouver with further random acts of violence, the frustration of the police chiefs around the country. All of these things point to how frustrating this is. It drives me crazy, to be quite blunt, that we're having to have this discussion and debate this morning and having to authorize the spending of property tax dollars on things that are clearly a common issue everywhere. But there is no practical alternative. Citizens in our community don't feel safe. They question whether we're doing anything, which I always find surprising, given how much money, energy, time, advocacy this council in particular has devoted to these issues. However, Councillor Manley, you'll be quicker than I hope, because I think they're ready to vote. Councillor Manley.
I just want to add to that. I mean, we've had tax cuts from the Mulroney government, the Chrétien government, the Harper government. We've seen services, austerity, and this is the result. We've had cuts to healthcare. Now we're looking at a big hospital bill and taxation locally to do that. We've had cuts to affordable housing, and this is the result. We don't have mental health programs. We've seen institutions closed, across the board. And what it is affecting is ordinary taxpayers and people who pay property tax. In the meantime, the multimillionaires have become multi-billionaires. And so, just to echo what's been said, this is a frustrating process at the municipal level, and it's time that we had a fair taxation system at the federal and provincial level, and people paid their fair share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not seeing any further speakers. All those in favor? And any opposed? Not seeing any. Motion carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Much appreciated this morning. Ms. Fulla, please.
Yeah, so there is a second part to this business case, but before we move on to that, I will just provide you with an update with that addition. Now you're sitting at 7.2% for 2025 and 6.6% for 2026. So the second part of that same business case addressed public space cleanliness. This was increased resources, and we have three options for your consideration. Option one, as a superintendent of sanitation, recycling, and cemeteries. This position would provide additional capacity to oversee public space cleanliness as the department's workload has increased in recent years, including the addition of 2 clean teams. This option would also provide additional funding in 2025 and 2026 to engage resources on an as-needed basis for encampment cleanup and other social disorder cleaning services. Under this option, staff would return in a future budget cycle to request additional resources if required, which may include additional clean teams if it's determined there's insufficient capacity within the current teams. The estimated property tax increase is 0.12 in 2025 and 0.05 in 2026, and a reduction of 0.05 in 2027, and that's because the contract services money is one-time funding for 25 and 2026 only, and it disappears in the budget in 2027. There's also a second option, which would be the expansion of the Clean Team program. This would add a 3rd community clean team and a superintendent of sanitation, recycling, and cemeteries in 2026. And there's 2 funding options for this one. One would have the fleet vehicle and the roll-off bin funded from general capital and would have an impact of 0.21 in 2026 and 0.07 in 2027. Or if you went with this option, you could fund both the operating cost as well as the capital cost from property taxation, and this would have an impact of 0.35 in 2026 and a reduction of 0.06 in 2027. And of course, the third option is to maintain the status quo.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, through you to staff. I'm just not understanding the rationale why we need a full-time superintendent.
Mr. Elliott, good morning. Mr. Thompson, thanks.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so I may be coughing through the chair.
Sound like you should have a radio voice or be Gregory Peck. It's a compliment.
So the department has grown with additional 2 clean teams. So we're up to and including 20 people that is being looked after by one supervisor at this point. Additional resources in that area is required to scale that back to looking after fewer people with supervision. And with this would be managing contracts with the contract clean services as and when required.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to suggest status quo for this one. No motion, just the preference.
Councillor Thorpe.
Is that a motion on the floor?
No, it's just the status quo, so no motion would be required.
All right, I'm prepared to move funding option 2A.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Gesselbrock seconds. Councillor Thorpe, please.
I think this option is a reasonable one, and it does not affect property taxes for the coming year. I think it is justified, and I think our clean team is an important aspect to the whole public safety issue. So I see it as worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
I'm just wondering, would this be one that we could defer until the final, or is that not possible? Yeah, see, I'm wondering if this would be one that we could defer till the spring, when we know what the numbers are, because I'm on the fence on this, and this is one, I'm like Councillor Hemmons, I'm on the fence, and I just wonder if a deferment till we know what our final numbers might be worthwhile, so that we do know. But I'll wait to what else everybody else says.
Well, as I indicated, my personal preference was to defer everything until we got final numbers, but having said that, if this comes to a vote, I will support Councillor Thorpe's motion. I think this is just one of those things where you have our folks literally out on the street or in the corridors or the stairwells, whatever, being seen, which I think gives this public a sense of safety. And Lord knows we get enough complaints about the level of cleanliness, so I'll leave my comments at that. There's no motion to defer yet, so we're just speaking to the motion. Unless someone moves a motion to defer. Councillor Manley?
Yeah, I think this is a valuable program as well, just based on the number of complaints we get from people using our parkades and the smell and the issues around cleanliness of our spaces and facilities. I would actually like to defer this as well, so I'll move to defer.
Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Motion to defer, I can't recall. It's debatable. No? Nobody's debating. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Comments on the deferral, I guess I've got a question for staff. Just with option 2A, would that bring any more resources for 2025?
No.
Okay. Can I speak to just my perspective on this? Pardon?
To the deferral. Anyone wish to speak to the deferral? Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship, and also a question through you to staff. I'm not sure who should answer this, but the deferral is to move this till later on in the spring, so we can take a look at it then. But if I'm reading this, the impact of the 2A, which is what we would be deferring, it has no impact on the 2025 budget anyway. Is that right? I'm just trying to figure out whether or not I want to move this to deferral when it has no impact on the budget whatsoever.
Through your chair to Councillor Perino, you are correct, it doesn't impact your 2025 budget, but it does impact your 2026 starting point. And so it is important, I think, to keep that in mind, because 6 months from now, we will be coming to you asking for direction on where you would like us to be for 2026.
26.
And we'll have that starting point there. So I think, to me, it's always important to look not just at year one, but what the choices you're making have an impact on year two. Because as you can see, this year in our budget drivers, public safety is a significant budget driver, and some of that stems from past decisions council has made. So it's always important, I think, to be forward-looking and not just focused on current year.
Considering Mr. Elliott is here with a cold, I feel for you. You come out, but I do think deferral is probably the best option.
Your Worship, can I just clarify too before council votes that if the motion to defer, we would bring back all of the options that are here.
Please, thank you.
So there is one of the options that does have an impact on 2025, but you could
We'll review it then.
in the spring.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay was going to point out what I was going to point out. When we're deferring.
That's good.
Councillor Hemmons, then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of process, I think it's a good approach if we feel collectively about something and the vote seems strong to go forward, those ones that were a bit gray on to reserve. I do want to note, if we say we did put this in, our 2026 rate is at 6.8 if we put this in, and so we're going to be back here again next year, and I think it's a real, it's very alluring to go after the ones that have 0% tax increases this year, but we have to do this again next year, and every time we push them out, that number is just growing. So just some general comments. Thank you.
The boomerang comes back. Councillor Armstrong.
I will support the deferral for the simple fact that I'm not sure if I wanted to go with 1 or 2, and this way I'll know if we can do it in this year versus the next year, because I am supportive of doing it. It's just not sure the time frame.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I put the motion on the floor originally, and I still believe in it and would support it, but I am willing to go along with deferral. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, all those in favor of the motion to defer? Those opposed? None. Motion to defer carries. Thank you very much. Ms. Fulla.
So the next business case we have is for an assistant manager in financial planning. This position would provide additional capacity to address increasing reporting requirements, information requests, as well as grant opportunities, and ensure the department can help support other departments in a timely manner. The department would also take on the preparation of the quarterly reports, which then would free up capacity within accounting services. It is also anticipated the position would help reduce overtime. There's 2 options for council to consider. One is to add the position April 1st of 2025 with a property tax increase of 0.08 in 2025 and 0.03 in 2026. And the second option is to maintain the current status quo.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Perino.
Your Worship, I was going to move the recommended motion, but if Councillor Perino has a question, I'm happy to let her go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I do have a question for staff. I'm just wondering, Ms. Fulla, how short is the Department of Staff right now?
Currently, financial planning is fully staffed. We just hired a new manager of financial planning they started 5-6 weeks ago, so they are fully staffed. They do have 2 staff members that are brand new, the manager and one of the analysts, and neither have municipal experience, so there will be a learning curve for them as they come up to speed. They have budget experience, but not municipal experience, and it's a bit of a different beast in the accounting world, but the department is now fully staffed after over a year being with multiple vacancies.
I know, and that was the reason I was asking it. It was, if we're fully staffed, has it made a difference? And anyway, I'll hold my thoughts. I'll take it back to Councillor Hemmons.
So Councillor Hemmons moving the motion, seconded Councillor Armstrong. I must say we've heard a lot about this already. I'm not prepared to sweat the staff in finance any more than we already have done so. It's clear to me this is a very needed and necessary position. If I'm not hearing any further commentary on it, all those in favor and any opposed, none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
So before we move on to the next business case, I'll just provide you with an update. So now in 2025, you're at 7.3 and you're at 6.6 in 2026. The next business case is for an assistant manager in current planning. So this position was a recommendation from the 2023 review of the departmental approval process. With the substantial provincial legislative changes, including bills 16, 44, 46, and 47, this department has had to reprioritize initiatives as the rapid response is required, and it's included bylaw amendments as well as process adjustments. The assistant manager will add capacity at a senior level to the department, will help them meet current and future expectations and demands. So there's two options for this business case. One has an April 1st start date of 2025, and the estimated property tax increase is 0.08 in 2025 and 0.03 in 2026. And the second option would be to maintain the status quo.
Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Gesselbrook.
Oh, I was going to move a motion, but I'll wait. Yeah.
Then Councillor Armstrong's moving, Councillor Gesselbrook is seconding. Do you wish to speak to it?
I'll just say, you know, they're so busy now. We're trying to get our timeframes down so we can attract more builders. With what the province has done to us, I think it's grossly unfair that there was no dollars attached to it. And once again, we're paying the price, but this is what's bringing in revenue to the city as well, so supportive.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrook, Perino, and Manley.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that this department has, you know, been overworked and has a lot of responsibility, and I think, you know, commitments around permitting time that we're trying to speed things up. I think this added capacity will go a long way, and I do have a question to staff. Just with the certified professional program and bringing that online and utilization, would this assistant manager position add capacity in sort of allowing that program to to be more fully utilized and get it up and running and working out the kinks?
Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrook, that's a great question. This position would, so this is in the current planning section, so the certified professional program is through a building permitting process option where developers, usually with complex projects, can bring in an additional certified professional that oversees, manages the project overall, and ensures building code compliance. But they are involved earlier on in the project, in the planning and design work and coordination. The certified professional would be on the developer's side. This position in planning that we're requesting, we're actually seeing some of the benefit there to being sort of a liaison role that would follow complex projects through the approval process. So although the certified professional program applies through the building permit application process, those complex projects would flow through planning, and the role of planning follows right from sort of the initial discussion, concept, design through to completion. So yes, we're seeing an interest in the certified professional program for complex projects. I think we're going to see a few this year. And this position, although it wouldn't be directly involved in the building permit review and issuance, would play a role in overseeing those projects on the approval side, if that helps.
Okay, great. So they run through the approval side, but that would have the impact of adding added capacity in terms of, you know, meeting expectations around timelines.
Yes, that's
great. Thank you.
Councillor Perino, then Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and a question and then a comment to Mr. Holm. Again, a question similar to what I asked the Finance Department. How short of staff are we for the Planning Department?
Currently, we have a vacant planning assistant and a vacant planner at the moment. So yeah, we are short in staff. It's a fairly flat section as well. This would help to sort of give it some depth. to allow for mentoring and growth opportunities as well, succession planning and the like. So, yeah, short-staffed currently, looking to fill a planning assistant and a planner position. So.
And it's rough. You know, we depend upon this department to get our developments going. The quicker we can get developments, the quicker we can get housing. So I'm in full support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley?
Thank you, and I do see the value in this as well. I think it's really important we get the development permits moving through so we don't have the kind of backlog that I do hear about. I have another question. We're developing a system that's more of a self-service kind of process for people to get permits, building permits, that kind of thing. How is that coming along? Where are we at with that?
We'll probably be coming with an update in the new year on that, but yeah, that would be sort of, I'm not sure, a self-service, it's enhanced service probably is more the term that I would use for it, but yeah, we're planning to come forward with a bit of an update in the new year on that.
So that people that know what they're doing can move their process through a little more rapidly. That's the sort of intent of the enhanced service.
Yeah, we actually made some changes there. I thought Councillor Manley was referring to the system processing improvements, the software system that we use, but also we've made changes to our building permit processes to allow to actually, I guess, to reward folks that submit complete permit applications. We do an initial review, and this was in March of this year. We presented it earlier, but it came fully into effect March of this year, where complete permit applications for complex projects, they're reviewed initially. If they're complete, they'll move on. We provide staff provide quite detailed feedback if they're not complete, which takes time and effort, but it's part of the learning process and bringing industry, helping industry learn and to work together on improving process overall. But if on initial review an application is incomplete, we'll send it back. So we're trying not to, we had a problem with the system being gummed up with incomplete applications that we're back and forth on requesting information, and they were delaying projects that were complete.
Right. Yeah, it bogs down the system.
Yeah, so we're having some success there. It's still early, but it's definitely helping, so thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I understand the importance of this, and I'm certainly prepared to support it, but I would remind council that we unloaded our pack horse this morning by a couple % practically, and now we're loading it back up again. So just to keep it in mind as we work through this long process. The motion's on the floor. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Noting the time, let's take the morning break.
Like any city, Nanaimo is a community that operates on a budget, and every year the city revisits that budget, looking closely at operational expenses, infrastructure upkeep, and new priority projects. Balancing how the city spends versus how much the city has available takes a lot of coordination, people power, and endless tables and line items. For 2025, the draft budget includes an operating budget of $214 million and a project budget of $63.9 million. That may seem like a large sum of money that can pay for a lot. Well, it is, and it does, with over $4.8 billion in infrastructure to maintain it.
The city is a growing community. This is not the sleepy coal town it was 50, 60 years ago. This is a community that is attracting people from around the world, and we need the infrastructure and the services commensurate with that kind of growth and development.
Now, you mentioned some services. Let's talk about some other services that might be important to the people of Nanaimo.
Look, parks and recreation are incredibly important. I mean, goodness knows, if I mention pickleball, everyone's going to get excited. Pickleball's become a growing sport. That requires courts. We just
Provide an update to council of where we are sitting. So we are now at 7.4% in 2025, and we're still at 6.6% for 2026. So
Thank you very much.
the PowerPoint doesn't seem to be working. Oh, there we go. So the final business case that we have is the additional members for the RCMP. So this business case is for 12 additional members, 4 per year, starting in 2025, to address community growth and demand for police services. We have 3 options for council's consideration. Option 1 is to add the members starting in April 1st, 2025, and the estimated property tax impact would be 0.38 in 2025, 0.46 in 2026, 0.51 in 2027, 0.16 in 2028, and 0.05 in 2029. Option 2 would be for the committee to provide a recommendation on additional staffing. Staff would then cost out the option and return to a future Finance and Audit Committee meeting for direction. And option 3 would be to maintain the status quo.
Councillor Armstrong.
Oh, thank you. My question to you or to Superintendent Burton, whichever one. We noticed that it's going to be 0.38%, but is it fair to say that if these positions are approved, we won't be seeing them April 1st? We may see 1 or 2, but, and then I'll ask my other question.
Certainly, thanks for the question through the chair to Councillor Armstrong. Yeah, that's correct. We're not looking, I doubt that we'd very much see any movement by April 1st.
Thank you. And to our finance staff, so if these, we don't start paying until the positions are occupied, is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, we pay based on the positions filled. We get billed for the actual.
Yeah, so if these aren't filled, we're not billed at this time.
Correct.
Thank you. And then my further question for Superintendent Burton. With these additional officers, we know that quite often there's a lot of members off with operational stress injuries, et cetera. Would this help alleviate some of those issues so that maybe they'll come back fast sooner or may not have to go off?
Yeah, again, thank you for the question through the chair to Councillor Armstrong. Absolutely, the work that we're doing is very trying, and it does take its toll on our members, and we are seeing an increase in occupational stress injuries. So obviously, we've got people that are away, and people that leaves the burden for the people that are there. So we've done some fantastic work to get our people back to work on a graduate return to work and to full duty, or where they've been asked to, you know, they're actually leaving the organization. So yeah, absolutely, having more members has a positive impact on mental health.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, Perino, and Gisselbrock.
I didn't see any other names on the list for discussion, so I was prepared to move option number 1, Your Worship, and I will, just to get it on the table.
All right. Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. To me, this is a top priority. Our community is growing, as we all know, and our challenges associated with that growth are growing as well, and we need to keep pace. Public safety is, I think, top priority for our citizens, and we're well served by our RCMP members, but they are stretched thinly across our city, and I think we need to give them more support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through you to Superintendent Burton. I'm just, again, how many officers are we currently short of? And how many are we, well, I'll let you answer that question first, if you could.
Through the chair to Councillor Perino, is the question how many officers are we short?
Currently.
Currently, okay. And I don't know in an open setting if I'd be responsible to speak to that. I can tell you that it's significant, and the absentee, not having the members there does make it difficult for the rest of us. I think it would be remiss to comment on the actual numbers just from a public safety standpoint.
Oh, okay. Oh, of course, I'm sorry, I had not considered that. Thank you for mentioning that. I will support this because the bulk of the emails that we get, including ones that I received last night, are about community safety. And we have to do everything we can to make sure that our residents are safe, because as much trouble as there is out there, we can't address those particular issues with the same way that we can at least provide our community with as much safety as possible through these new officers. So I'll definitely be supportive.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thanks. Through you, Mayor, just some questions just in terms of like the extra officers being requested in terms of right now where we're experiencing delays in response. Could you just speak a little bit in terms of how it would help, I'm not sure it's processing prosecutions or, responding to somebody needs to go check out an encampment or dealing with, an immediate major crime. Just curious if you could speak to a little bit of sort of how this added capacity will help in sort of particular pinch points you're experiencing right now.
Thank you, through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrecht. My apologies. Yeah, obviously, the more hands on deck, the better for us. Our plan, immediate plan, we've earmarked 4, and I think I spoke before this council before. I'll never come and ask you for. I'll never try and negotiate. The 4 that I'm looking for per year are that's the bare minimum, and that's through careful consideration on all of our resources. So essentially, the first 4 that we've got, we've earmarked for 3 to our general duty, our frontline policing, and 1 to assist with our mental health liaison. And I think we all heard here this morning and through previous meetings that we know that there is a concern with mental health and substance abuse in the downtown core. We've seen some remarkable successes with our mental health liaison team, which is, it's a partnership between the RCMP and Vancouver Island Health Authority. So that in itself is going to be one of the spots where we're going to direct a resource to, and our frontline policing, which is kind of the frontline policing for a reason. That's where our members go, that they're the first on the scene, and from that point they can take the initial information, and then it can often be provided to our serious crimes, to our drug enforcement, to our Revoy site, or to our bikes, or to our mental health. So that would be the breakdown on that.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up question. In terms of, every community is different, and I just haven't really seen more detailed breakdown of our staffing and benchmarking with other communities. It does seem like that we are understaffed from the feedback that we get from the community and the requests for assistance on certain situations. And I'm just curious if you could speak to a little bit of benchmarking. Have we been chronically underfunding our policing contingent in Nanaimo through the years, and have just sort of are dealing with a historical deficit, or how are we doing compared to other communities, and speak to that at all?
Yeah, excellent question, and through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrecht, and I'm taking this from the submitted business case, and it talks about a breakdown of the 2023 RCP members, and excluding our crime analyst, and it's per population. So currently for 2023, the members per population, the contracted strength for Nanaimo is 160 members, which is about 1 member for 674 population. The actual strength for 2023 is not 160, but 141, and which does the math to 1 member to every 764 members of the population. And the average of 6 comparable municipalities, which is direct response to your question, what they're contending with is 1 member per 758 members of the population. And across all police services in 2023, it's 1 member for 562. So we're significantly servicing more people with less police officers here in Nanaimo.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley, then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Now that Councillor Kesselbrock is a constable. You can deputize me if you wish. I have a question around like the request. Like, I imagine that it's important to get this request into headquarters and depot that we're asking for more since we're running short. So making this decision now is an important decision to make at this point for in your view.
Yes, excellent question. Thank you through the chair. Yeah, we're not at situation critical yet, but we have to be mindful of the growing population and the pressures that we're facing within the city of Nanaimo. And in order to keep up with those things, we have to be timely in our requests. As I said, Inspector Rochette's done a great job of forecasting where the members are going to go. We're not in a position to be able to discuss where they'd go in subsequent years, but for this year, we recognize where the pressures are, and that's how we'd be responding with that breakdown of 3 to the general duty and 1 to our mental health liaison.
Okay, that's great to hear. One for mental health liaison as well, because that's a really important position. How are things going, like overall? Like I know with after COVID, there was a drop in members getting trained at depot, and the number of cadets coming out of the system. Is that improving overall?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Manley. Yeah, we've had Sergeant Manley. We've had some big successes on where obviously that COVID took a hit on not just the policing industry, but pretty well every industry, and it did cripple us for the couple of years following. So we're just now getting back up to where we need to be with it. And in speaking with some colleagues, we know that Depot is going to be turning out significantly more recruits than they have in probably the past 10 years in order to play catch up. I really don't want to be in that unenviable position of playing catch up as we go too much farther down the road.
Okay, thank you. And I know I'm going to support this. We're a growing community, and that means we need additional support services for public safety, firefighters, RCMP, community safety officers, etc., staffing. It's just the reality, the situation we're in. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Obviously, I'll be supporting. I didn't support the last year's ask for reasons, but I think this year it's really important that this gets supported. I just wanted to point out that Victoria pays for 243 police officers. We pay for 160. We have almost 24,000 more population and a higher caseload. So I'm very concerned that when the negotiations come up in the next RCMP contract, that they will be looking for parity in resourcing. So I think this is a start to get us there. That extra 12 members, and I think, because that's who they're going to be looking at. They're not going to be looking at other RCMP, they're going to be looking at municipal police forces, and our numbers are very, very low compared to others. So I think this is a good starting point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastmere.
Sorry, and apologies if we've already gone over this, but I just guess I don't quite understand funding the RCMP budget at 92% and then adding new positions, because my understanding is that's because there's positions that already exist that they can't fill. So how is it that there's positions available that you can't fill, but we need to hire more officers? Like that's not computing for me. Okay, so Councillor Armstrong is saying they're off sick and they're on pregnancy and mat leave. Is that the full answer for that?
Sorry, I'm not sure I'm in the best position to answer.
Yeah,
is the question about the financing of the officers? Perhaps that's better something for Mrs. Fuller.
Ms. Fuller.
Through the chair to Councillor Eastmere. So our bill that we receive from E-Division is based on the number of positions that we are paying for, and then the related expenses for those positions and overhead costs and that sort of thing. So we are not being billed for the number of members that we are contracted for. And unfortunately, I'm going to turn that back over to Superintendent Burton because he would be better able to speak to why we don't have all the members that we are contracted for.
We'll let Councillor Armstrong talk for a few minutes before we get to the superintendent.
This used to be my job, I can answer it. It's called soft vacancies versus hard vacancies. The hard vacancies are positions that are not filled, period. The soft vacancies are those that are off on maternity leave, paternity leave, long-term ODS. Under the contract, after 30 days being off work, it goes over to provincial collator and the city no longer pays for those positions, it's paid for by the province. So that's why when we refer to vacancies, you're calling the hard vacancies, which is the positions that haven't been filled. So that would be these 4 positions would be considered hard vacancies until they're filled. And the soft vacancies are those that are off, unable to do their duties after 30 days, correct?
Absolutely, and I think that's right off my page, so that's a perfect answer. The only thing,
job.
yeah, there you go. The only thing that I would add is we call them ODS, off-duty sick positions. These are owned, and they can't be filled in the meantime until the positions are relinquished by the owner of the position through resignation. They return to work, retire, anything like that. So that's just to add to that detailed explanation. Does that?
Thank you. Certainly I'm going to support this, and for all the various reasons that have been stated already by council, but in fairness to Councillor Armstrong's comments about Victoria having more police officers, yes, Victoria is also the downtown core of a much larger urban area, and the concentration of crime there, as my friend Merrill will remind you, she's paying for police to handle all the criminals from Central Saanich and Esquimalt and Langford and every other area, which she finds frustrating. But we are what we are, and we are a growing community, and Lord knows we get enough concerns raised from time to time just around traffic safety. Why can't we stop the speeders? Why can't we get rid of the noisy whatevers, et cetera, and that's because the RCMP can't be everywhere. And on this topic generally, I've had a bit of correspondence back and forth with folks around their CSOs, and why can't, if a tent goes up in a public pathway near my house, why can't it come down quickly? Well, I'd like folks to remind themselves, there's the RCMP within the boundaries of the city of Nanaimo serve 108,000 people. 108,000 people. Our CSOs, a dozen of them, serve 108,000 people. Our bylaw officers, and I'm not sure of the exact number, serve 108,000 people. It's a pretty tough job to maintain a perfect level of security and safety. And so thank you to them for doing what they do every day. Having said that, the motion's on the floor. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Gesselbrock, you got to punch yourself up here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just speaking to the motion, I don't doubt that it's needed. I mean, there is a lot of requests and response times, and then you look at the burnout, and it's a very difficult job. I think looking, at our budget, there's already 2.5% increase just on the contract negotiation increase, and it's we are spending a lot on police services, and it is, it's just a lot of money that we're investing, and I think initially, I could have gone either way in sort of putting this off a year and going on it just with the contract increase, but I do recognize it's needed, and we do need to get onto it, so I'm willing to support. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Eastner is opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
So
Ms. Fuller, please.
before we move on to the next decision point, I'll just bring you up to date. So that puts us at 7.7 for 2025 and 7.1 for 2026. I'd also like to point out the business case was prepared at 95% because that's what the draft budget was at. Since you made the motion to reduce the RCMP contract to 92%, we will adjust this business case down to 92%, but I don't think it's not going to be significant enough to move you off your 7.7. So our next decision slide is to do with the road maintenance budget. So at the January Governance and Priority Committee meeting, the results of the asphalt level of service study was presented. A motion was made for council to consider increasing the annual road maintenance budget by 1.5 million during 2025 budget deliberations. We have 3 options for council's consideration. One would be to increase the budget by 1.5 million starting in 2025. And this would have a 1% property tax increase. Option 2 would be to increase the budget by 775,000 effective 2025. That have a 0.52% property tax increase. And option 3 would be no change to the draft operating budget.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to recommend option number 3, status quo, so it doesn't require a motion.
Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Eastmere.
We have to minimize the tax, and this is an area that we can. So I'm not proposing that we increase this whatsoever.
Yeah, it's, pardon me, no motion required.
No motion, yeah.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a question through you to staff, Mr. Elliott, I suppose. And my question is this. If we proceed with option 3, which is the status quo, are we putting ourselves in danger of being what I would, or my grandmother would have called penny wise and pound foolish? In other words, will we be putting ourselves in a bigger hole, not a pothole, but a bigger hole for future budgets if we don't increase our maintenance now? Is that something you can answer?
Yes, through the chair too. We definitely are in a declining situation with our roads network, and we brought forward that last January, just talking about that and demonstrating what work had been done on that. And yeah, we're at our current rate, we're not spending enough on the roads to keep them to a level of repair. So as we push that off, it will become more problematic.
Thank you. I will make a motion to defer this item pending the result of our future financial information, if there's a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. Ms. Vicar, on the motion to defer.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So you would just proceed to vote.
All those in favor? And those opposed to deferral? Councillor Gesselbrock, motion carries. Thank you very much. I was going to say the pavement lives to fight another day. Ms. Fuller?
Yes. So our next decision point comes from our September Finance and Audit Committee meeting, where a motion was made for Council to consider during 2025 budget deliberations a 10% annual increase for 5 years, so 2025 to 2029, in project grant funding, and a 25-cent per capita annual increase for 3 years, 2025 to 2027, in operating grant funding. So we have separated this out into 2 separate decision points. The first one is for the project grant funding, and we have 3 options for your consideration. Option 1 is a 10% annual increase for 5 years starting in 2025. The budget would increase from $44,407 to $71,519 by 2029. This would have an estimated property tax increase of 0.003 per year. Option 2 would be a 10% increase effective 2025. The budget would increase from $44,407 to $48,848, and it would remain here for all years of the plan. So this is just a one-time increase to the funding. And this would have a property tax impact of 0.003 in 2025. And option number 3 would be to maintain current funding levels.
Thank you very much. And for the record, Ms. Vicar has pointed out Councillor Brown is with us and wish to be noted that he voted against the deferral, correct?
Your Worship, so Councillor Brown has advised that he has voted in opposition on the RCMP increase item as well as the the asphalt one just a moment ago.
Okay, thank you. Let the record show, so to speak. All right, Councillor Manley.
Thank you. I would like to move option 1. It's a relatively small amount of funding. It's a relatively small amount of funding, and these organizations do really good work to brighten up our community, and so it's important that we do this increase, small as it is. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Eastmere. Councillor Eastmere, you wish to speak to it?
No.
It is a rather small amount of money. Any further discussion? We're talking, what, $27,000 roughly? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. That was easy.
Before we move on to the second part of the motion from council, just to bring you up to speed, you're still at 7.7 and 7.1. It wasn't enough to move us off those numbers. On the operating grant funding, we also have 3 options for your consideration. Option 1 is a 25-cent per capita annual increase for 3 years. The rate would increase from the $3 per capita to $3.75 per capita in 2027. This would have an impact of approximately 0.02 for 2025, 2026, and 2027. Option number 2 would be a 50-cent per capita increase effective 2025. The rate would increase to from $3 to $3.50 per capita and remain at this rate for all 5 years of the plan. The estimated property tax impact for 2025 of this choice would be 0.04, and option 3 would be to keep operating grant funding at its current budget level.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to move option 1.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong.
And again, just these organizations, a lot of bang for their buck, and we saw that with the report for the nonprofit sector the other day. So,
Councillor Eastmere.
If you like option 1, option 2 is even better. I think slightly more funding. We see the number of applications we get from our local arts and culture organizations far outstripping what we're able to fund. And option 2 is an increase of 50 cents per capita as opposed to 25 cents per capita in option 1. So I would have first preferred to see support for option 2.
I'd ask you to note, Councillor, that it's 25% per year, so it comes to 375 in total. It's just spread out over 3 years.
Okay, so you're telling me that I've read it wrong?
Well,
that
option 1 is 25% per capita for each of 3 years, so the total will end up being 375 by 2027, as opposed to 350, which would be effective earlier. But is it 6 1/2 dozen the other in terms of the total amount of money at the end during this period of time for the financial plan, Ms. Fulla?
To the chair, if you go option 1, because you are going to be at $3.75, there will be a bigger there's a property tax impact in future years, which if you do the 350 now, you have a one-time property tax impact because there's no future increases.
For what it's worth, I'm inclined to go with option 1, which is Councillor Manley's recommendation.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification, and I see how it's split over the 3 years rather than 2, so.
Whatever it is, it's a tiny pot. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.
So before we move on to the next
Ms.
decision
Osborne
point,
and team, a very easy morning for you.
before we move on to the next decision point, so that that option has now moved us up in year 1, so we're now sitting at 7.8% for year 1, and we're still at 7.1% for year 2. So our next decision point comes from the October Finance and Audit Committee meeting, where a motion was made for council to consider during 2025 budget deliberations increasing the annual operating grant for the Restorative Justice Program from $50,000 to $150,000 starting in 2025. This would have an estimated property tax impact of 0.07. As the committee requested, we have also provided some additional choices for you. One would be to increase the operating grant to $100,000, which would be a 0.03% impact in 2025, or to increase the operating grant to $85,000, which would be a 0.02, or you can maintain the current annual operating grant of $50,000 and have no property tax impact.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, I was going to ask you to speak first to this, given your experience, so you're number one on the list anyway. Well done.
Yeah, well, if there's no, I was actually going to move number one, but the reason that I do support this, and again, going with my previous experience in life, this is a great program that really makes a difference in a lot of people's lives, especially youth, so it keeps them out of the court system where they actually learn to be better criminals a lot of times if they do go through the court system probations. It has a much better impact for victim services, or for the victims, because they get to speak. So I'm an extremely strong supporter of this program. A lot of people that go through it don't reoffend, so I think it's just such a small amount, and they haven't had an increase since, I believe, in the early 1990s, something like that. So like, this is just so needed, in my opinion. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Gesselbrock. Councillor Gesselbrock, do you want to speak to it? Well, actually, Councillor Manley's jumped in ahead of you, so.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Your Worship. I would just second what Councillor Armstrong has said about this program. I've worked with youth who've been involved in this program, people who've made some mistakes, and actually like having them in the criminal justice system and in the training school that is our penal system is not opportune. So I've seen people turn their lives around just by getting into those, the nonprofit sector and helping, and then feeling really good about themselves and really turning their lives around. So I just think it's a valuable program and worth the extra funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. Yeah, I just think it's an important program. It's going to save us more money in the long run, so thank you.
If I just may say, and I hate to be slamming the provincial government again, but the reality is this is an amazing program. It has one of the best track records in terms of public expenditure and return on investment, so to speak. It makes the lives of our RCMP easier over time, reduces the criminal element, as Councillor Armstrong's pointed out, and it still astonishes me to this day, notwithstanding changes in government, why government after government in Victoria, regardless of who's in power, never seems to want to put money into this program, which just has so many benefits. Having said that, I'm frustrated by the fact that taxpayers, property taxpayers have to fund it, but sometimes you just have to bite the bullet, and this is one of those occasions. Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I gave this a lot of thought, and I came actually this morning prepared not to support this for the reason that you've just indicated. I'm very frustrated, but I do, on the other hand, totally recognize the value of the program, and I suppose it's one of those cases where, for the amount involved, I'm willing to support it because of the value of the program, but just a download which is absolutely unfair on local governments. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour?
Your Worship.
Sorry?
Thank you. Staff would just like to confirm which option was moved and seconded. One. Thank you.
Yes. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Fulla, please.
So that brings us, we're still at 7.8 in 2025 and 7.1 in 2026. Our next decision point is also from the October Finance and Audit Committee meeting, where a motion was made from Council to consider during 2025 budget deliberations increasing the annual budget for the Neighbourhood Association Granta Program from $10,000 to $20,000 starting in 2025. We have three options for your consideration. One is to increase the budget to $20,000. This would have a 0.01% impact in 2025. Option two would be to increase the budget to $15,000. This would have a 0.003% impact. And option three would be to maintain the current Neighbourhood Association grant budget.
Thank you very much. And looking at the amounts involved, I'm sure we're going to have a long and vigorous debate this morning. I'm going to start off with a question, if I may. I'm going to jump ahead of Councillor Preener and Councillor Gesselbrock. Mr. Holm, are we seeing a significant demand for the funding?
Yes, Your Worship. Definitely it's appreciated by the neighborhood associations, and we've seen, since the introduction of the grant, we've seen annually an increase in the number of associations that are applying, and it is helping them in the work that they're doing. I think mentioned when we brought it forward in October, originally for consideration, and it was set aside for budget discussion, that a lot of the money goes towards insurance and helping to support events, and yeah, there's definitely a demand for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino, then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Your worship, I'd like to move a motion to defer this to the spring.
Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Thorpe, for deferral.
I just think it's important. It's minimal cost. Don't want to get into a long-term discussion about this. I think we need to just wait and see how this budget flushes out in the spring, and we'll have a better idea about what we can and cannot give to this particular program.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock, you wish to speak to the deferral?
Yeah, for me, this
Pardon me,
is.
we're not supposed to speak to deferral.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yes, thank you.
We can't speak
no
to the
debate on the
deferral.
deferral.
Okay.
Rules have been clarified for me this morning. All those in favor of deferral, Councillors Thorpe, Perino, myself, and those opposed to deferral, Councillors Armstrong, Eastmere, Gesselbrock, and Brown. I know. Well, that's why I said vigorous debate. And Councillor Manley, you're opposed to deferral as well. The motion to defer fails. Back on the main motion. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Oh, sorry, the motion's already on the floor, never mind.
Which motion?
Oh, option one on the floor.
Seconded. Discussion on option one.
Yeah, I think this is.
Go ahead, Councillor.
The mover, yeah, I think this is a minimal amount of money in terms of the multiplier effect in terms of getting individuals volunteering, putting on events, and enhancing the fabric of the community. And I think that it's an extremely small investment for what we get out of it. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's not so much about this. You have to forgive me. I didn't want to interrupt the previous vote, but still a bit of a point of order on the deferral. Because we are a committee, we're essentially just making recommendations to council. So I'm not sure the committee can sort of bypass council that way. So I'm just curious on how that works from a procedure perspective.
Ms. Vakar.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when we do record the motions in the minutes, it will reflect that the committee is making a recommendation to council for deferral or any other direction that's adopted by the committee today.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on that, we're not going to debate it, but I would argue that it's just a recommendation and therefore it is debatable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Manley.
I'm just going to say I'm going to vote in favor of this because it actually saves the city a lot of money. Because I know in my neighborhood, we get a lawnmower and we do all the maintenance of the park, which saves a lot of money. So I think it's a very small amount of money for a lot of good things.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manley.
I just have a quick question. Like I'm looking at option one, we're going from 10,000 to 20,000. It says the property tax impact is 0.01%. And then going option two is $5,000 different, but it goes to 0.003%. Is that an error in the math?
Through the chair to Councillor Manley, it's rounding. The actual impact of option one is 0.0067, but we try to stick to 1 or 2 decimal places for these. When it shows that it's 0% when we're still at 2 decimal places, then we go to a 3rd decimal place. But if we actually have a number at 2, we go to 2. So.
Okay, so you won't be rounding up when you're adding to this total that we've got going on.
When we come to council, we come to rounded to 1 decimal place with the property tax increase, but the actual taxes are calculated to the penny.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. And the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation. Ms. Fuller, please.
So we are still at 7.8 and 7.1, moving into our final decision point this morning, and it is the request from the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation that the committee consider increasing base funding effective 2025. We have 3 options for the committee to consider. Option 1 is increasing base funding from $515,850 to $815,500. This would have a property tax impact of approximately 0.2. Option number 2 would be to increase the base funding to $665,000. The estimated property tax impact is 0.1 in 2025, and option 3 would be to maintain base funding at $515,850.
Thank you very much. In council's hands, anyone want to defer this one till we know what the final numbers are, or a better idea, or move one of the motions? Councillor Eastmere.
I'm in support of option 3. Status quo. So no motion required.
All right, and do you wish to say anything further on it?
I think they've been well resourced, and they are in a good position to continue with the funding that they have at this point, and I'm excited to see the work that they're doing and the partnerships they're creating, and I support them, just not with an increase in the budget this year.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Concur with Councillor Eastmere.
And Councillor Thorpe.
I also agree with Councillor Eastmere. It's a fairly new corporation, which I do support, but I think it's early days to be asking for an increase in funding. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. You know, I would support the increase the base funding to $665,000. I understand, you know, it is early. It is in its initial stages, the corporation, but it has been, you know, operating now for 2-3 years, and they have set up their office. They have, you know, a permanent CAO in place, and have now established, you know, very clear strategic plan with actionable points that they want to move. And we just had the presentation last Finance and Audit, and I think it was clear to me that enable for them to execute on the programs that they'd like to, they'd need funding to do that. And so I think by not providing an increase to the base funding, we're going to hamper their ability to carry out the objectives that we've really set out for them and that they've confirmed to their strategic plan. In the report, in terms of getting up a properly running prosperity corporation, it did say that it would, you know, a well-functioning corporation would be operating between, you know, a budget of $750,000 to $1 million, and we're still well below that. So I do have concerns that, you know, we put an incredible amount of energy getting this thing going, and now not really giving it the proper resourcing for it to be effective. And, you know, down the line, you know, we could be in the situation where we're complaining that the Prosperity Corporation is not actually doing anything in what we want it to, when, you know, the reasoning behind it is not properly resourced. And so I can understand the reluctance given the property tax increase, but this is something that I would, you know, prefer to see deferred as opposed to status quo. So I'd move a deferral.
And I would second that motion. Anyone wish to no speaking to deferral. All those in favor of deferral? Councillor Skesselbrock, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Manley, and those opposed? Councillors Armstrong, Eastmere, Thorpe, and Perino, and Brown. Motion fails, so there's no motion required. For practical purposes, Ms. Fuller, this can obviously be brought back, though, because we've done nothing. Thank you. Well, it achieves almost the same effect. No.
Okay. Oh, status quo. There we go, okay.
Yeah. You've got me on track before, Councillor Manley. Don't throw me off now. All right, we have no reports, no other business. Question, Ms. Bullis, sorry.
Yes, I just want to wrap up to advise council. So we're going to take the direction you gave us here today. We'll incorporate these changes, and we will be bringing the provisional budget for first 3 readings on December 16th.
Thank you. And Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just going to say to your point that, again, all these are just recommendations, so council or a councillor could revisit anyone at a council meeting. Just the primacy of the council table reigns supreme. Thanks.
The OK corral is still there, and we can have it in shootout. Councillor Gesselbrock, Thorpe.
I got a question, yeah, to ask regarding the budget.
Councillor Armstrong, we have 3 active councillors here who wish to speak, so please.
First, yeah, just on the project funding, I had a question to staff, and is there, basically when we had the project funding presentations and the IT department presented, there was the project for the software for the permitting applications, and the timeline given, I think it started the project was in 2023, and that it would be looking to completion in 2027, and it went in stages. But I'm curious if there's any opportunity to accelerate that. Like, I think there's an opportunity to get that in place that could alleviate, you know, substantial staff resourcing in terms of the permitting thing. And that's my question. Is there opportunity to accelerate that through resourcing or contracted work? And if that is, you know, I'd be curious in, you know, a motion to get options on that.
So through the chair, good morning, and to you, Councilor Kesselbrecht, thank you for the question. Excuse me. I would say that there would be, but then we'd have to weigh against the consequences of doing so. So for example, if we wanted to apply more IT staff to work on this project, that means that we'd have to slow down other activities to the ERP, to cybersecurity and our other priorities. We could start looking at additional contractors for sure, and then direct some of the budget that we have associated to it to increase, for lack of better words, our bench strength. So they'd be able to come in and assist with, could be programming, could be business analysis, as well as implementation. So short answer is we could, but then I'd want to have a conversation about what would fall off the table, because there's other priorities that we have that resources are currently being dedicated to.
So just to follow up on that question, like, is there any opportunity? So I understand, you know, if we were going to go with our current capacity in the IT staff, that we would have to rejuggle priorities, which would be very tricky. There's a lot of important projects in stream. I guess the question is there options to increase the capacity without having to rejuggle the priorities through contracted work to?
Through the chair, I think it's something that we could explore, and I would also suggest too that we have explored, and we do have a contract with a consultant right now to assist with our business analysis to identify other areas where we can find process improvements. But then the other concern too is that we, as Mr. Holm was here, we're talking about needing the requirement for the assistant planning manager, is that they would need to make resources available as well to assist with making these improvements. So we can bring on the contractors, we can find areas of improvement, but then Mr. Holm's team would need to make adjustments within their own work schedules so that they in turn would be able to not only assist in terms of the requirements for it, but then most importantly, have the training and have the wherewithal, for lack of better words, have the time to adopt the processes and to make them part of their new standards.
Right, so there's a capacity draw on current planning.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in and add as has been mentioned. So yeah, there's the IT side. As Mr. Ings mentioned, that you know, there's obviously a possibility to add additional resources there, but as well juggling different priorities. Similarly on the development approval side, so it'd be staff from current planning, the permitting, building inspections, subdivision, development engineering that are having to fit this work into their other priorities and the approvals work that they're doing. So we've laid this out in a way that provides for that. It's still challenging to fit it in, and there's a change management aspect to it as well. That it is a large change to manage that we want to get right. So I think rushing it has some capacity challenges and also some change management challenges that could be that could create a negative experience for our customers and a challenge for our staff to implement it any earlier.
Okay, and the new manager in current planning that could potentially be online, would they add capacity to supporting that process?
Yes, that would be one of the things that they would help with for sure. Is overall even beyond this, this specific project, but in implementing process improvements across the board.
Okay, thank you. You know, I think at this time, like, I understand that there's, you know, there's multiple departments. If, you know, I'll discuss, but I would contemplate, you know, looking at, you know, if there is opportunities for contracting out the IT side of it, once, you know, we can identify if there is capacity in current planning, but I'll pursue that later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, then Councillor Manley.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted, before we adjourn, to confirm with Ms. Fulla, are we still at 7.8 as our number?
Through the chair to Councillor Thorpe, yes, we are at 7.8 in year 1 and 7.1 in year 2.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Manley.
Press my mic? Okay, there we go. My question was similar, and I hope that your projections for growth were conservative and that we'll be able to knock this down a couple of percentage points.
Don't get their hopes up. I didn't want to ask that question.
Okay. Anyway, motion to adjourn.